This is Listen Lakeland, the show that keeps you up to date on all the things that make our city a great place to live, work, and play. Today's host attended the University of South Florida for dance and is the executive director of the Florida Dance Theater. He leads a dynamic team of passionate artists working to diversify the way dance impacts our communities. He's on the board of Lakeland Vision, Harrison School for the Performing Arts, and the Mayor's Council on the Arts. Please welcome your host, Jermaine Thornton.
Welcome to the good life.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Jermaine Thornton, and it's great to host this month's episode of Listen Lakeland. This show is an extension of Lakeland Vision. For over 2 decades, Lakeland Vision has been a voice for the citizens of Lakeland, working with community stakeholders to create a bright future for our city. Today on Listen Lakeland, we're going to be talking about arts and wellness and its impact in the community. Today's guests include Tiffany Van Wieren, the Arts and Medicine Coordinator for Watson Clinic Foundation, Allison Han, Wellness Director at Florida Presbyterian Homes, and Peggy Corson, the Arts Coordinator at Florida Presbyterian Homes. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I wanted to start off this discussion today just really diving deep into wellness and arts. How do those things correlate? Can you briefly speak about what drew you to your current area of industry? Allison, would you like to start?
Sure. I think, when I think about wellness, I think about the 8 dimensions of wellness and, working at a retirement community, how do the arts play out in our community? And, as with wellness in the 8 dimensions of wellness, art, can speak in so many different ways. It can speak, the social dimension. We think about the emotional dimension, the spiritual dimension. And, and with our residents, there's different avenues where they can pick up on that art, whether they're painting, quilting, dancing, our bell choir. There's just a lot of different areas where they can express themselves. And, wellness just ties it all together to allow them to be able to do that.
Tiffany, what are your thoughts?
So I got into this after, doing a lot of different kinds of jobs. So I was a program manager, I was a small business owner, I was an educator, and kind of transitioned into this field, which is arts and medicine, sort of by happenstance, but I've always been fascinated by the intersectionality between where art meets health and wellness. It's fascinating, and the more that I delved into it, the more I realized there's tons of research behind it that just really proves and creates validity around the idea that arts really weaves all of those things like a tapestry together. And so I'm very passionate about being able to advocate for that within our community because it touches everything. It touches education. It touches, our young people, our elderly citizens, our senior cares. It touches all of those things and really helps us to create our best selves as an individual and as a community.
That's really, really impactful right there. The arts, as you say, the arts are a part of everyday life. It's woven into our very being. When we think about just the emotional aspect of people having a bad day, what do you do when you have a bad day? You put on your favorite piece of music, you wear brighter clothing, you open the windows, try to get some fresh air, and you start singing, you hear birds singing. Like, it's really woven into, who we are. Peggy, how has the arts played a part in your personal life?
Oh, since early childhood, I was involved in art, and it's very important. To me, I've seen how people who are going through loss and different things in their lives, they come out through their art, and you can see more or less how they're progressing. And it's also brings them together, because they appreciate each other's art, even though it's all different fields. And in my personal opinion, art is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. So what's beautiful in one person's eye is not art, but to others it is. So we appreciate everyone's art.
So my mom used to say this growing up, let your eye form beauty in whatever it sees. And I take that with me, wherever I go.
Yeah.
Not just in regards to arts, but in regards to people, in regards to the way that I treat people, the way that I interact with people, the way that I also allow people to interact with me. That also plays a key factor. I think that even with that, the arts and wellness together it's very powerful. It speaks volumes on so many different levels. Do you see an increase or decrease in the appreciation for the arts in our community in today's society?
I would say I've seen an increase. I mean, not just in our community, but, worldwide, really. I think the pandemic really brought to our attention how deeply impactful the arts are for all of us. And through that, I've seen, especially as we kind of come back together again, the true sort of flourishing of that creativity. And I think, you can see it in our community. You can see it with, the art that we see throughout the community. You could see it, when we go to places like Polk Museum of Art. We could see it in the way that we bring the arts into everyday life within our community, I think is pretty powerful.
I think she's spot on. I think our community has done a good job. I feel like, there are opportunities to enhance and to grow, but, we have a wonderful, museum, our Polk Museum of Art. I think, having Florida Dance Theater and the wonderful things that it's doing within our community and the partnerships that are being created, I think is another wonderful, thing that we have. I think there's a lot of different expressions of art, and I think people being able to see that there are different expressions, that art isn't just one thing, that it's a lot of different things, and making that available to people through classes, interaction, and promoting and doing things just like what we're doing today, being able to talk about it, not just for a certain age group, but making it available to all age groups, I think is really important. So I feel like, our community is doing well, but I think it can grow and do better. There's always room for growth.
I love that you talked about accessibility in that, because so often we think of arts, especially certain kinds of arts, like when we think of ballet or we think of high-end art, we think that, of it just being a certain type of person that gets to experience those things. And so I think we do a good job as Lakeland of creating some accessibility around that. I think that we also have a lot of room where we can grow our accessibility to that for every person.
I think that one of the things that we could also do is, even for our listeners, you are listeners, where do you want to see the arts go within the next 1 to 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? There's so many windows for opportunity, to engage, to challenge the arts world, to pull in all these different elements to improve your wellness, your quality of life. The arts impacts wellness, just like as you said, Allison, in rehabilitative practices as well, not just, dance therapy, those types of things, music therapy, all those elements are really, really important. What ways do you listeners want to engage with the arts? Because we in our respective areas, we can assume, we can have things plotted out and planned for what we think the city needs or the residents need. But it's really what you, our listeners, our residents, our community stakeholders want to have. That also is another layer of it, I think.
I think one good way that we could do that is providing a survey and asking the community, hey, what would you like to see? What do you think we're doing good at? And then what direction would you like for us to go? And, given some choices, but also asking for some choices, getting some ideas. I think that's, really important because, we at this table, we may have our thoughts, but what does the community want? What do you want? And being able to take that information and to plan and to coordinate off of that, I think that'd be very impactful.
I agree. Miss Peggy, what do you, in your experience with the arts, what would you like to see?
I would like to see accessibility more for, like in my group, the retirement home, knowing how to contact the art instructors and get them at our facility where they could give classes, because they really want the classes. And we have some, but a lot of times we don't know who to contact or how to reach them. And that would be most beneficial if someone could provide that.
And I think that falls under the accessibility. Bringing people who have a passion to teach and to share their love for, whatever like genre that they have that passion for. And, like Miss Peggy said, bringing them on campus or bringing them to those different people groups to be able to share that, I think, would be wonderful. And maybe having, a place, a website, like here are some things that are available within the community in these locations, and you can go and take a wonderful dance class, or there's another quilting class or whatever, but really pulling everything together. I feel like there's a lot of great things going on in our community, but maybe just bringing it all together in one location where everybody can very easily access it so that they know like where to go and where they can pick up on it. Just like she said, we would love to have people come on our campus and do more with our residents because they do have a love for different areas of art.
When I think too, when you think about accessibility, you can't just have that idea of, well, I'm going to bring everybody to me, because that creates accessibility issues, right? You have accessibility issues with trying to bring people to you. So I think any sort of dynamic step towards accessibility has to be twofold. It has to be, how do we bring people here and create these wonderful engagements with the arts? And how do we, actually maybe even threefold, and how do we go to the people, right? I think the third component of that is, how do we leverage what's already there within the community and within different dynamics of our subcultures that we have here in Lakeland, and really incorporating some of that diversity into those arts engagements as well.
Yeah, and that's like a three-prong effort, and I think it's there. It's just being able to enhance it and make it better. I think that's, spot on. What
do you think, what's the response you would like to get?
I think the response would be engagement, engagement with the arts primarily, but just engagement at all. So, I drive my kids to school, right? We have these wonderful pieces of art on the sides of buildings. And my kids talk about them, I talk about them. It gives us a chance on the way to school to discuss art. And that's a beautiful thing, right? Creating, these engagements that we may not necessarily see, I think are really wonderful, but, really seeing excitement around those too. And I always like to look for, when I'm looking at making a positive impact, that snowball effect, right? So people get excited about it and it sort of generates more and more.
It's just really showing like how we can really dive deeper. And really, I think of like tentacles, like an octopus with, just stretching everything out and really, really getting our hands in different areas. So thank you so much, ladies, for your time. We have two more guests that are going to be joining us in just a moment. And we are back. Thank you so much, Tiffany Van Weeren, for sticking with us for this second session. We also have two new guests. We have Dr. Alex Rich, the Executive Director and Chief Curator of the Polk Museum of Art at Florida Southern College. And we also have Miss Suzanne Lovely, who's a local dance educator here in the city of Lakeland. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Jermaine.
So I'd like to start with you, Dr. Alex. How has the arts played an important role in your life?
Well, I think, I grew up in New York City, and then moving here to Lakeland, I've seen the way that arts impact our lives from our earliest years. And I think in terms of what I've seen here in the growth of Lakeland, even over the past 5-10 years, has been incredible. See that way, from a young kid, I loved going to museums and I loved going to art classes. And I think that what we realize as we get to be adults, and in terms of what we do at the museum, we realize the way that impacts someone as their full being. And, our conversation today surrounds arts and wellness. And oftentimes what's overlooked is this idea of social fitness, being able to think about your place in the world, think about how others' lives are reflected through cultural offerings. You go to a museum, of course, that's my domain, and the art history classroom is my domain at Florida Southern. But, people come in and they learn about other people's worlds over time, over cultures. Empathy, the development of empathy, is vitally important to seeing something outside of your own vacuum. That helps your mental health. The ability to go through galleries at a museum like ours and look at art, have conversations about art, opens up your whole realm of being, in addition to feeling isolated, getting your mind off of the things that may trouble you. They are means of escape. And I think that social fitness side of it is something that we all realize forever. And that's been vitally important to me from the time I've been a kid to being a professor to being a museum director and curator. That's all vital in what I do and what I try to do every day. And I think we've seen that growth also in our community through all of our arts organizations. I think it's essential to why culture is important.
And it's kind of jumping on that. So arts and health, arts and medicine is kind of relatively a new field. I say that, but of course I'm probably going to sound kind of weird saying that, because it really kind of began developing really in the 90s. And now we have like this plethora of research showing how these things not only impact us emotionally, but physically have impact. You get 24% improved health outcomes when people are engaged with the arts. In fact, so much so that they did a really great study where they put art in hospital rooms. And patients who had a piece of art hanging in the hospital room, on average, got out an entire day earlier than their peers who did not have art hanging in the classroom, or in the, not classroom, teacher, in their hospital room. And that not only affects that person that experiences the art, but it affects, the GP, the community as well, the city, the hospital, their numbers that they have, all of the costs that go on with a hospital stay. All of those components kind of tie in together. You at University of Florida and Chance Hospital actually have wonderful research that you've talked about, how arts can impact things like Parkinson's and dementia. You'll have a patient who doesn't remember their name, or, the people around them, but they can come back to themselves through a piece of music. You have Parkinson's patients, and there's wonderful research around this, where they can't keep their hands still. But as soon as they sit down to play a piece at the piano, their hands become still and they're able to regain control of their fingers. I mean, these things that we don't necessarily, I think we tend to think of arts as play and as something extra when we have enough time, rather than the shift that I feel like is happening, which is understanding that they're not just something that we need to do when we have time, but they're really just an inherent part of who we are as humans.
And to go off that point, I think that art and science are often set up as these dialectical odds, right? Yeah. They are completely different things, especially people studying in either field. But as you said, Tiffany, there is true data to support the advantage of studying art, being around art, listening to music. All of it enhances people's lives. And as you said, people truly do improve their health by looking at art, by listening to music, by learning to play an instrument, and in general as well. I mean, it helps people who have any sort of disability to overcome those disabilities, to have any sort of aphasia, any sort of suffering, of any sort of dementia. We see that daily at the museum. And my team here locally in Lakeland, we think about that and think about our audiences and the accessibility of our programming to audiences of all abilities all the time. And I think we can all improve in terms of what our organizations do as we bring greater and greater attention to the needs of a wider population. But that's what we all are in this for. We are trying to, especially for nonprofits, we are there to provide for our community. And I can think of so many instances where we've done Alzheimer's specific programming. We've done autism spectrum specific programming. And to see the looks on those populations and their caretakers and parents and guardians' faces with the experience experience they have makes everything we do so worthwhile. And that speaks to the heart of the arts, and I think why people need to warm up to it more if you are a skeptic about art. Everyone looks at art and listens to music and watches dance and performs every single day until you may not realize and you say, oh, wow, I'm just watching a TV show. Guess what? Every streaming show you're watching is also art. So art is around us and is essential to everything we do. And just think about what your day would be like if you're not reading a book or reading a magazine. By the way, that's literary arts. If you're watching a TV show, that's art. Going to see a movie, playing a video game, those are all forms of art, and you may overlook it, but it makes you feel better. That's your relaxation time, but it's also working your mental energies. And that's why it's so vital to everything we do. That is all wellness that we're unaware of on a daily basis.
That's so true. That is so true.
And I would say, too, listeners at home, if you want to delve a little more into this, Americans for the Arts actually has a social impact wheel that is an interactive tool where you can see the impact of the arts on all different facets of life, not just wellness, but education and the city and everything. It's a really wonderful tool.
That's just awesome stuff. Suzanne, I really wanted to have you speak on your experiences, because you're a local dance educator and you have taught students of various abilities and, various stages of life, things of that sort. Can you speak about that for a little bit?
Definitely. So I agree with Tiffany regarding how the arts, and specifically dance, has really made a big difference in students I've seen. I've noticed a big change with their confidence, especially the fact that many of the kids that I have taught have had some varying degrees of disabilities. And the fact that, we could be in a class and I'll say, okay, a couple of you choreograph together 8 counts, and to see what they have collaborated together and come back with to perform, it's really very, very special. And I think that there's a lot of growth there and a lot of confidence building and camaraderie that I've really enjoyed seeing the past years.
And I think that's true, Suzanne, as you said. I mean, arts are a collaborative space as much as they are a solo space. I think there's something to be said for what you can gain on your own in any involvement in the arts, but also it's a space for learning to work with others and learning to build upon your own skill sets with others. At the same time, it's also to get to see the world through others' eyes or others' voices or performances. So I think that is so important. It has so much room for everyone to grow unto themselves, whether that's awareness of others or awareness of oneself.
Right, and how they see it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes. Especially as our, we think of, again, the arts, if we think of it as this sort of thing of play, but, we think of those educational components, right? Because we always think about our kids, our future, our kids. But as adults, it's so needed for, us to play as well. Whimsy and play are part of who we are, and we think, I try to tell my patients that I work with at the cancer center, which is primarily where I spend a big chunk of my day. The patients and the caregivers there, I tell them, art isn't about perfection, it's about connection. And so we think, I feel like as adults, we think, well, I'm going to do this and it has to be beautiful, or it has to be, you want it to be competent, right? Perfect. You want it to be an outcome, right? I'm creating a product. And if I'm good at it, I'll sell it. No. So, we think we have to create this thing that's going to be this wonderful thing. But one of my favorite things is my mom singing. And my mom would tell you she can't sing. She goes, I can't sing. I don't carry a tune in a bucket. But I love hearing her sing. It's one of the most beautiful things. And I think we get so caught up in this idea that I have to create this perfection or this standard, that we forget that art isn't about that. Music isn't about that. We can appreciate the beauty and magnitude of an artist who has spent years cultivating their craft and honing their craft, but it's not necessarily about that when we are interacting with art. That is something that we can appreciate and heightens the experience, but it is not everything that is the experience of art and the arts.
Along those same lines, I see it in the classroom a lot. I see it at the museum a lot. And in terms of people negating their own abilities, either as an artist of any kind or their appreciation for art. I get students coming into my art history classroom all the time and say, I don't know anything about art. Well, That's the point of your being in the classroom. And there's that great aha moment that you have. Wow, I love this. Maybe I'll become an art history major or a minor. Or you come to the museum and I don't know anything about art. Well, that's the value of coming to the museum. And we are an academic community museum at the Polk Museum of Art. So we're for our community, but we're also proudly, and I say unapologetically academic, because I think in terms of wellness, the idea that you can have some sort of aha moment, or that we privilege intelligence, we privilege the idea that we're not going to teach down to you. People like to learn. When you come away from the Polk Museum of Art, I challenge you not to have learned something or to have had a great time. And I think that is wellness too. Wow, I came in a skeptic, and I love that Edward Hopper and Guy Pendobo exhibition. I love the Lauren Austin Life in Quilts exhibition. I loved seeing something I never would have known about. And I think people take pride in that, and also that feeling, wow, today I did something new and I learned something new. And oftentimes that's people pushing themselves beyond their own expectations, whether that is thinking you don't have a great singing voice, or learning something, or learning a new dance routine. Just doing something outside of your comfort zone can make you feel really good, because you will succeed, especially in the art world, when there is no definition of what makes something a perfect form of art.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I think that also says is that the arts unlock another layer of your authenticity.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. It's very, very true.
With basically what you were saying, Alex and Tiffany, what you're all saying, Suzanne as well, is that the arts flows out of an authentic place.
Right.
It's a safe space. And when someone feels that, that's when the true power of who they are is unleashed. It's unlocked. They feel safe in that environment and they shine. And that's what really empowers a community. That is what really empowers someone's quality of life and quality of being and quality of contribution. Because if someone doesn't feel comfortable, if they don't feel safe, if they don't feel that they are valued or that they matter, they're not going to invest their time, their talent, their treasure, who they really are, into anything.
And the best, and along those lines, the idea of authenticity, the best forms of art are those that are accessible to all audiences, but also accessible to those who take to different genres and subgenres of art. Not everyone's going to love this exhibition or this style of dance or going to the opera. You might have people that like all different elements of the art world, but there's something available to everyone. So you can find where your own authentic experience comes from, whether you are a performer or an artist yourself, but there's that world of art's complete accessibility. I think more than any other realm of human experience, there's something in arts and culture for everyone. And I just think it's just provable. Just think about what you do every day, right? I mean, as an art historian, I would say everyone's an art historian. Whether you've trained or not, we look at the visual world around us every day. You may not realize it, but it is woven completely into your whole being, and it is accessible, and you will find your authenticity through something that relates to you, and hopefully that gives you a better relationship to other people. I mean, that's very vital to wellness, is how your world impacts others' worlds and understanding of others' worlds. And I think that's truly at the heart of what, again, art is about. So that makes it very authentic and accessible. And we could do a better job making individual organizational programming accessible, but art itself begins as, I think, the most accessible entry point into our existences together.
I would say, too, kind of piggybacking off of that, as well as what you were saying, creating empathy, I think, is one of the roles of art in general. Kind of pushes us to think past our own experience. And, when we talk about things like literacy and reading, and how the brain, if you're reading about an Olympic swim diver, I don't know if that's the actual correct verbiage, but you're reading about an Olympic swimmer, and your brain, and they're swimming and they're running out of breath. Your brain is actually thinking of what that experience is actually like. It doesn't know the difference between actually experiencing it and necessarily that it's on a page. And I think art kind of presses us in that way. It helps us to kind of put down our guard because we're in that safe space, and allows us to be open to other opportunities. When I think about, the arts in my own life, I came from what would probably be considered an at-risk sort of household growing up, with some less than ideal sort of situations. I was very grateful that I didn't have it as bad as some people, but I definitely struggled a lot as a kid. And I would say that music saved my life in many ways because it was a safe place where I could just be whole and safe and sound, no pun intended. And even during the pandemic, when I think of things that created wellness for me, and I can't be the only one, okay, that picked up a pandemic instrument like a ukulele and now has like 6 ukuleles. My husband says I have a problem. I don't have a problem. I just like ukuleles. I can't help it. So I'm sure I'm not the only one that had picked up something new that was arts related during that time when we needed each other and we needed that connectiveness. So I think, creating that empathy, pushing us to experience new things, it's all part of that job of the arts if we think about what our role is, and it integrates into that wellness factor.
And Tiffany, I think speaking of the pandemic, we all entered into the pandemic not knowing what that would be like. Yeah. And we all suddenly became isolated into our own worlds, our own little bubbles. And I think we found that for all the detriments of our virtual world and the fact that people live in their phones and, everything is accessible to us all the time, which again, art hopefully takes us outside of those spheres. Mm-hmm. We realized during the pandemic that there was a way to connect through the arts as well. I mean, whether that's virtual programming, we question what do our organizations look like during a time of pandemic, right? Absolutely. And I think all of our organizations realized new ways to grow, and we came to people where they were, quite literally in their homes. And the idea that you could take dance, the idea that you could take exhibitions, that you could take music and bring that somehow into people's spaces and make them feel like they're still together as a community, I think was a really important thing we learned. And then we take those lessons from the pandemic and now we've applied them back to the in-person or in real life world. And that's somewhat been a little bit of a struggle, I think, to say we did it so well virtually, but people don't want to be on Zoom anymore. Yeah. And to think about how do we make that connectiveness still work that people oddly gained through arts during the pandemic. And now we're on the other side of it. So, I mean, I'm sure, Suzanne, you've seen that with students back in the studio. I'm sure you've seen that.
Right. Honestly, my mind right now is going to a little different place in that through the pandemic, speaking of, we did all become so much more appreciative of what we could see on, streaming and this and that and all these live performances that are now on video that we can see. But what I kind of have a little bit of a hard time with is the lack of support in dance. And I don't know about the other areas of art, but in the fields of training, to get to that beautiful performance that you see, how does it come to be there? So I would really love to see our community in the next 3 to 5 years support, some development of some of the training for the ballet school, Florida Dance Theater. What happens there? They've got the professionals, the real professionals teaching these children. So I would love to see the support grow there. And, I know that at the museum you've got several classes, but
the behind the scenes, how do you get that next generation involved in knowing the behind the scenes? We do, my program's museum studies. They're teaching that next generation of folks. It doesn't just, an exhibition doesn't just appear.
Exactly.
A dance performance doesn't appear, but also I think that can help people to know that what they're doing and the way that art is important to them can also fulfill them throughout their lives.
Right.
And how do you do that when education funding keeps getting cut? And how do you make that accessible to students who maybe have 2 working parents that work 2-3 jobs?
Right.
So creating funding around those opportunities to create that accessibility for those wonderful joint programs and creating all that. So,
and then remembering our older communities at the same time. Right? It's always such a delicate and important balance between that. How do we help the next generation appreciate the role of art in their lives, but also remember how essential it is to our older population?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And even with these questions, it really reinforces the need for stronger collaborations and partnerships. Even with our organizations as nonprofits, as independent artists, how can we then forge a stronger alliance that we can then go back out into the community and utilize, what we currently have to then create these pathways of accessibility and to, for our aging populations, for our middle age and younger, what does that look like? I'm really grateful that you all took the time out to share your thoughts with us on arts and wellness. And I know this discussion is not over. It's a very, very in-depth discussion. It's much needed. It's very much appreciated. And, honestly, I think the best is yet to come. I honestly do. Once we're bringing attention to this, and you are viewers, or you are listeners, what do you want to see happen with arts and wellness? How can we shape and plant seeds? Plant seeds, water seeds. How can we, as a community, take this to the next level? That's a question we'll have to answer another time. So thank you so much for tuning in to Listen Lakeland. Your feedback is valued, and we encourage you to head over to www.lakelandvision.org to participate in our monthly survey related to today's show's topic.
I said, welcome to the good life.
Listen Lakeland is brought to you as a collaborative project between Lakeland Vision, the City of Lakeland, and Hall Communications, a community working together to provide an exceptional quality of life. Thank you for being with us.